This is the Databricks Data Engineer podcast. Today you'll learn why most Databricks interview prep is aimed at the wrong target and what to study instead. Let's dive in. You memorized every Delta Lake transaction log detail. You can explain the protocol. You know about add files and remove files. You can recite how time travel works under the hood. The interviewer didn't ask about any of it. Instead, she pulled up a scenario. Your pipeline went from 10 minutes to 2 hours overnight. Walk me through how you diagnose it. And you froze. Not because you don't know Spark, because everything you studied was built for a different test than the one you're taking. Let me tell you about an engineer I'll call Sarah. 4 years of experience. Solid Databricks work. She'd been preparing for a senior data engineering interview for 6 weeks. 6 weeks. She had a Notion page with tabs, one for Delta Lake internals, one for Spark memory management, one for cluster configuration options. She could tell you the difference between shuffle hash join and sort merge join. She could explain exactly when adaptive query execution kicks in. She walked into that interview feeling ready, genuinely confident. The first question was a system design prompt. Design a pipeline to ingest clickstream data from 3 sources, transform it, and serve it to a team of analysts running ad hoc queries. Sarah started drawing. Medallion architecture, bronze, silver, gold. Autoloader for ingestion, delta live tables for transformations. She was precise, she was fast. She covered every layer. The interviewer listened, then asked, why autoloader instead of copy into? Sarah paused. She'd always used autoloader. The docs recommended it. She said something about it being the standard approach. What's the data volume? How often does it arrive? Is it streaming or batch files dropped every few hours? Sarah didn't know. She hadn't asked. She jumped straight to drawing architecture, and right there, in that silence, something shifted. She could feel it. The interviewer's energy changed, not hostile. Just recalibrating. Sound familiar? Here's what was happening on the other side of the table. The interviewer wasn't grading Sarah's knowledge. She was grading Sarah's judgment. And the gap between those two things is where most Databricks interview prep falls apart. Let me explain. There's a pattern I see over and over. Engineers preparing for Databricks interviews study what's documentable. Transaction logs, Spark internals, configuration parameters, memory management, the stuff that lives in docs, blog posts, and certification guides. Makes sense, right? If someone's going to test you on Databricks, you should know Databricks. Study the technology, master the details. But here's what nobody tells you. Interviewers at the senior level aren't testing whether you know the technology. They're testing whether you know when and why to use it. That distinction is everything, and it has a name. I call it the preparation gap, the space between what candidates study and what interviewers actually evaluate. And it's the single biggest reason qualified engineers bomb senior Databricks interviews. The preparation gap works like this. You spend weeks memorizing how things work. Shuffle partitions, broadcast join thresholds, photon query, engine internals, Z ordering versus liquid clustering. You build this tower of technical knowledge, and it feels like progress. Each new concept you learn feels like another brick in the wall, but the interview isn't a knowledge test, it's a judgment simulation. The interviewer wants to see how you think under constraints, how you gather requirements before proposing solutions, how you make trade-offs when there's no perfect answer, and none of that is in the docs. Think about what Sarah did. She heard design a pipeline and immediately started drawing. She mapped the entire medallion architecture in 2 minutes. Bronze, silver, gold. The layers were clean. The tool choices were defensible. But she never asked a single question, never said, what's the SLA? How fresh does the data need to be? Who's querying this downstream, and what are their access patterns? She treated the interview like a test. Draw the right architecture, name the right tools, show that you know the stack. The interviewer was looking for something completely different. She wanted to see Sarah think through trade-offs. She wanted to hear, if the data arrives in hourly file drops, autoloader makes sense. If it's a continuous stream, I'd consider structured streaming with a trigger interval matched to the SLA. That's the preparation gap in action. Sarah studied what autoloader is. The interviewer wanted to know when Sarah would choose it and when she wouldn't. Here's where it gets personal, because I think a lot of people listening right now have a version of Sarah's Notion page. Maybe it's a spreadsheet, maybe it's a bookmark folder full of Medium articles about Spark internals. And the uncomfortable truth is this: most of that material is testing you on recall. Can you remember what you read? Can you recite how Delta Lake handles concurrent writes? The interview is testing something else entirely. Can you diagnose a problem you've never seen before? Can you make a defensible trade-off when two valid approaches both have costs? Those are different skills, and they require completely different preparation. Now, I want to be clear here. I'm not saying technical knowledge doesn't matter. It does. You need to know what broadcast joins do. You need to understand how Delta Lake handles schema evolution. That knowledge is the foundation, but it's table stakes. Every candidate who makes it to a senior interview knows those things. Knowing them doesn't separate you. It qualifies you to sit in the chair. What separates you is what you do with that knowledge under pressure. Let me take you back to Sarah's interview. After the system design question, the interviewer moved to a debugging scenario. Your overnight pipeline suddenly takes 4 times longer. It was stable for months. What do you do? Sarah's brain went to her study notes. Shuffle partitions. She could increase them. Broadcast, join, threshold. She could lower it. Caching. Maybe she should cache intermediate results. She started listing techniques. I'd check if we need to increase the shuffle partition count. I'd look at whether any joins could be broadcast. I'd check memory allocation and see if we're spilling to disk. The interviewer nodded, then asked, which of those would you check first and why? Sarah hesitated. In her study notes, they were all listed as equal optimization techniques. In practice, they're not even close to equal. The diagnostic path matters enormously. Here's what a senior engineer says to that same question. First, I define 4 times longer. Is every stage slower, or is one stage dominating? I'd open the Spark UI and look at the stage timeline. If one stage went from 10 minutes to 3 hours while the rest stayed the same, that's a completely different problem than everything being uniformly slower. If it's one stage, I'd look at task duration distribution. If 99 tasks finish in 30 seconds, and one task runs for 3 hours, that's data skew. If all tasks are equally slow, that's likely a resource or configuration issue. Once I know the bottleneck, the fix is targeted. Data skew, solve the join key. Spill to disk, check if upstream data volume changed. Uniform slowdown, check if the cluster configuration was modified, or if the input data tripled overnight. Do you see the difference? Sarah listed techniques. The senior engineer described a diagnostic process. Sarah said what she'd do. The seniors showed how she'd think. That's not a knowledge gap. It's a preparation gap. Have you ever listed optimization techniques in an interview without first diagnosing the actual problem? Be honest with yourself. Now let me show you where this pattern really starts to hurt. The preparation gap doesn't just lose you one question. It changes the interviewer's entire mental model of you. When Sarah listed techniques, the interviewer internally categorized her as mid-level. Someone who has the vocabulary but applies it generically. Someone who'd need guidance on a real production issue. When a candidate walks through a diagnostic process, the interviewer categorizes them as senior. Someone who can be handed a problem and trusted to find the right answer, not just a technically correct one. And here's the expensive part. That categorization happens in the first 5 minutes. The rest of the interview usually confirms it. The interviewer isn't consciously biased, but once they see lists techniques without diagnosing, every subsequent answer gets filtered through that lens. One hiring manager put it to me this way: I can teach someone a new tool in a week. I can't teach diagnostic thinking in a month. When a candidate shows me they think in systems and trade-offs, that's the signal I'm looking for. So, what does preparation look like if you're bridging the gap? Let me give you a simple reframe. Stop studying what things are. Start practicing what you do with them. Instead of memorizing, Autoloader handles incremental file ingestion using cloud storage notifications. Practice this. A teammate proposes Autoloader for a source that drops 50 large files once per day. Would you agree or push back? Why? Instead of memorizing broadcast joins, skip the shuffle by sending the small table to every executor. Practice this. Your join is slow. The small table is 15 gigabytes. Someone suggests a broadcast join. Walk through why that might actually make things worse. Instead of memorizing Delta Lake's transaction log records every change to a table, practice this. Your Delta table queries are getting slower every month. What would you investigate, and in what order? See the shift? The knowledge is the same. The preparation angle is completely different. You're not studying facts, you're building judgment. I want to be careful with this next point, because it sounds like I'm saying, don't study. I'm not. The knowledge has to be there. You need the technical foundation. But once you have it, and if you're interviewing at the senior level, you probably do, the prep time should shift dramatically. Instead of 80% knowledge review and 20% scenario practice, flip it. 20% knowledge, 80% scenarios. For every concept in your study guide, write one scenario where you'd use it and one where you wouldn't. Write the trade-off. Write the question you'd ask before choosing. That exercise alone will change how interviewers perceive you. And here's the real test. The one that tells you if you're caught in the preparation gap. Pull up whatever you've been studying, your notes, your bookmarks, your Notion page. Look at the last 10 things you reviewed. How many of them are facts about how something works? And how many are decisions about when to use it versus something else? If the ratio is more than 50-50 toward facts, you're preparing for a test that doesn't exist. The senior interview is a judgment simulation, not a knowledge exam. Let me tell you how Sarah's story ends. She didn't get the offer from that interview, but she changed her preparation completely. Instead of adding more topics to her Notion page, she started running through scenarios. Every day, one prompt. Design X given these constraints. Debug Y given these symptoms. She talked through her reasoning out loud, explaining why she'd check things in a specific order. 6 weeks later, she interviewed again. Different company. The interviewer asked the same kind of question. Your pipeline suddenly started failing. Walk me through your approach. But this time, Sarah's first words were different. Before I troubleshoot, can you tell me what changed recently? New data source? Code deployment? Cluster configuration update? The interviewer paused, made a note, and for the rest of the interview, Sarah noticed something she hadn't seen before. The interviewer was engaged, leaning in, asking follow-up questions that built on her answers instead of redirecting. She got the offer, and the feedback from the hiring manager said one thing that stood out. Strong diagnostic instinct, thinks in trade-offs, not techniques. Not knows Delta Lake well, not understands Spark configuration, thinks in trade-offs. That's what the preparation gap costs you, and that's what closing it earns you. So here's the thing I want you to take away from this. Your study guide isn't wrong, it's incomplete. The knowledge is necessary, but at the senior level, knowledge is the floor, not the ceiling. The interview isn't asking, "What do you know?" It's asking, "What would you do and why?" Next time you sit down to prepare, try this. Pick one concept from your study notes. Then ask yourself two questions. When would I use this? And when would I specifically choose not to? If you can answer both with a concrete scenario, you're preparing for the right test. If this changed how you think about interview prep, send it to someone who's studying right now. They need to hear this before their next interview, not after. See you next time.